We're back for another week, another year. I guess this is our first of 2022. It is the DC Sports Huddle. We thank MGM National Harbor so much presenting this to you. It's time to change the game at BetMGM Sports. It's Dave Johnson, Rob Woodfork, Dave Preston, George Wallace, or as we like to call ourselves, the familiar suspects. All right, here we go. February 2nd, about a month from now, less from now, we find out on the Today Show. Is that Katie and Brian still? I haven't watched it. No, anyway, it's a great show. I'm just busy in the mornings. I'm busy. That was not a shot. I'm busy. We hear Brigade, Armada, Commanders, Presidents, Red Hogs, Admirals, Defenders, an unofficial, official finalist list. We know, the only thing we know, it won't be Red Wolves or Wolves. There is a third division soccer team. I bet you nobody knew this. The Chattanooga Red Wolves play in USL League One. So maybe that's why we won't have the Washington Red Wolves. Dave Preston, go. Do you like any of these choices, or do you have a suggestion?
You knew where
I'm going to take a page from one of our colleagues and one of your colleagues from Channel 4, Mr. Pat Collins. The Washington football team, look what you've done. See what you've done. Sewage at the stadium, failing railings where fans are falling over, old peanuts. Before you change your name, you better start thinking about changing your ways. I actually I thought Regiment was a nice one. That's not on the short list. I don't think any of the names are gonna, I think every name, if you choose any of the names, no one's gonna be happy. It's gonna be much like when the Wizards changed from the Bullets and people were upset for a while. They've now accepted it. But I think that perhaps the Defenders or something along those lines, none of the names jump out at me. Red Tails, I thought was interesting, as a hat tip to the Tuskegee Airmen. And somebody said that the color scheme of the Washington uniforms that were unveiled on Twitter are similar to what was on those airplanes during World War II. I wouldn't mind that, especially given the franchise's really, subpar history over its first, what do you want to say, first 75 years of existence, and especially they were the last team to integrate. So the first 30 years of this franchise, really, really bad history in a city known as the Chocolate City, where there's a large African-American population. I think that would be a nice gesture, and I could root for the Red Tails. That's probably my choice. But before they change their name, they got to change their ways.
All right, bottom line, you don't like any of the final choices.
No, hate them.
That's a 10-second answer. George Wallace, quickly, do you like anything here?
All right, here,
I'll
you know what I'm going to go with? I like, if we're going to go, if those are the finalists, because here's what I think it's going to be: Commanders anyway. But if I'm going to do anything on that list, I kind of like the Hogs. I'm leaning towards the Hogs. They're announcing it on Groundhog Day. You got a link to the past. Joe Gibbs has anything to do with it. Red Hogs, whatever. You can't shorten any of the other ones. You just can't do it. I'm just done with the whole thing. Let's just get it over with. But if you're asking me to pick from that list, I'm going Hogs.
All right, Rob.
Well, I don't want to pick from the list. I'm still hanging on.
You have to. Dave says you have to.
Still hanging on to my Federals, but the Admirals kind of grew on me as the more I talked about Admirals, because there was sort of some online connecting of dots that the WashingtonAdmirals.com was rerouting to or redirecting to the Washington football team's website. So if that was them sort of tipping their hand, I could get used to Washington Admirals. But anything else, and just like Dave said, anything else on that list, it's going to get a Wizards-like response. And, you just don't want to come off sounding like you're a third-rate organization, even though they have, when railings are collapsing on the opposing quarterback, you are looking like a third-rate organization, but you don't want to have the name to match. So I would say, look, if they go with Admirals, I wouldn't be mad at that, but I'm still hanging on to hope of Federals.
Okay, but here quickly, and there's a lesson getting back to what Dave Preston said. I emceed the unveiling of the Washington Wizards at Union Station. It was a first-class affair. We're coming off a playoff season when Michael Jordan anointed the then Bullets, soon to be Wizards, the team of the future. It was received with a very positive response because the team was winning and on the upswing. So that make all these names, or any name, to Dave Preston's point, will be more palatable based on the results. I think at this point, with the way things have been going for this franchise with sewage and railings and everything else we just talked about, no matter what is unveiled, there's going to be snickers and sneers. And it's not easy to name a team in Washington. Keep in mind, one of the choices for the Wizards, runners up was Seawolves, and I've never seen a Seawolf in the Potomac River.
Sea Dogs. I'm still mad at
Sea
that.
Dogs.
I'm still mad at that. What is
Right,
that?
well,
Only the Sea Dog.
No, anyway, but to the point, Federals was a great name. Sadly, you don't want their history of success. I think they won 3 games in 2 years of the USFL. But it's a strange list to me because Defenders we just had with the XFL, which was a great name. And people had fun for the 2 home games they played. And then sadly, we were shut down by the pandemic. As somebody who's lived a lot of my time in Annapolis, I don't want Admirals because to me, Admirals speaks, a Navy town. So it's a hard one. I think I would go with Commanders if I was pushed into a corner, although that still bothers me because I was at the debut of the Washington Commandos Arena Football League game in 1987 when it was still an experiment from Jim Foster, a former Maytag chairman who designed arena football on a cocktail napkin. All right.
Can we throw a right in? How about the Washington Beer Snakes? Because that was the best thing about the XFL. Also, the Washington not sewage, because it wasn't sewage from the sprinkler in that Monday night game.
And the Admirals, which I didn't even know until yesterday, it's a Major League Quidditch team apparently in DC, right?
Right.
Is that right? Yeah.
You got that going, yeah.
And by the way, my theory on that is that they purposely had Washington Admirals redirect the Washington football team
I think
to
so.
get people thinking, aha, we got you.
Either that or someone's going to get fired quickly.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would think the Steelers or somebody would be smart enough to try and send up smoke screens. But do we really think Washington is that forward thinking? I don't think so.
And Steelers, by the way, the only team name that's also a corporate logo. US Steel's logo. So with that, I think we should close the huddle because that's the only thing you're going to learn today. All right, let's go on. I mean, the final game this week, Taylor Heinicke is going to start. I keep hearing this phrase with NBA players about fit and opportunity. It can apply to any sport. So clearly, Ron Rivera is looking for players for the fit and opportunity. And to Rob Woodfork's point, I'll start with you. You wrote that column that, look, first 2 years in Carolina is mirroring his experience here to some degree, record-wise. You hope the third year is the same when he had a 12-4 record with the Carolina Panthers. Can that be?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I broke down in the column. There's 2 notable examples in recent years of that big jump in year 3, and it was Ron Rivera's Panthers. He went 13-19 his first 32 games here. That's the exact same record he had in Carolina his first 2 seasons there. Year 3, as you said, 12-4. They're in the NFC Championship game. Another example is the San Francisco 49ers under Kyle Shanahan. Those first 2 seasons were just awful. They win 6 games. I think it was 4 games the first year. 6 games the first year. Then the second year, they dropped back to 4 games because of injuries and a lot of, issues with the quarterback. Sound familiar? And then they end up in year 3 going to the Super Bowl, and they were up 10 points in the fourth quarter until Mahomes happened. So am I saying that Washington's going to be in the Super Bowl next year? No. But what I'm saying is there is precedence for there to be a big sizable jump in year 3, even if year 2 sort of, is a step back from what they did in the first season. So I look, and we know at this point everything that happened to them with the COVID outbreak and all of that. But I gave the caveat in the column. You got to do something. You got to swing for the fences for a quarterback. This is the year to do it, because if you go into 2022 with Heinicke under center and then go 6-11 or whatever next year, there's not going to be an opportunity for you to use the draft picks that you would send to Houston for Deshaun Watson, for example. And I'm not necessarily, he's just an example that I used, but there are other options available. You've got to explore it. You've got to swing for the fences. Otherwise, it's going to be lather, rinse, repeat. And then we're going to be looking for another coach in 2023.
Quick history lesson. If Dan Snyder owned the team the first time Joe Gibbs was coach and there was sports talk radio we never would have had the Joe Gibbs experience in Washington. That's a quick history lesson. Joe Gibbs, this guy can't coach. This guy can't coach. He's out of here. Jack Kent Cooke had the patience, stayed with him, and look what happened.
But to be
I'm
fair,
not
they were
saying
in the Super Bowl in year 2, though. So I mean, they were in the Super Bowl in year 2. So I think Snyder would have given him a second year. But if this was a situation like Cowher in Pittsburgh, it took him 15 years to get that Super Bowl.
Right.
He would have been gone.
Right.
Snyder or anybody else for that matter was the owner.
Okay, let's go to Dave Preston quickly.
Well, I think when you look and we talk about Joe Gibbs, and what I think the biggest difference between Joe Gibbs and 81 was that he was coming into what was still a fairly decent culture, the one that Hall of Famer George Allen established from 1971 to 77. The 79 team under Jack Pardee was within a whisker of getting home field advantage. The culture that Ron Rivera inherited was several rungs down, and I think you need 3 years just to cleanse. It's like a coffee mug that hasn't been washed in 6 months. Not that I've ever done that. You need to throw it in the washer 2 or 3 times before it gets to be good again. But to Rob's point, they do need a quarterback. They need to make a big move for a quarterback, because right now their roster is such that next year and the year after, you're going to be seeing guys that they're going to lose some guys. Matt Ioannidis is probably going to head elsewhere because he's too expensive for his role. You're going to see a lot of the pieces on that great defensive line that they put together. They won't be able to stay. You need an offensive weapon because Curtis Samuel, I'm not going to think that he's going to be healthy next season. You need another receiver. You also need a quarterback here for this team to have any hope whatsoever of getting to 8-7-2 next season.
You'll have to throw in those ties. Of course, another history lesson. It is a different NFL. Back in the day, Joe Gibbs could say to Jack Kent Cooke, I want Wilbur Marshall, and he'd buy him, and it was that simple. It's a much different world. George Wallace, after 2 years, where are we going?
Yeah, and here's the other thing about the quarterback situation. So next year, if you don't draft somebody next year, you have to start that clock, because then all of a sudden you're going to go, whatever you're going to go, 5-6 wins. Then you're going to get fired. Another coach going to come in, and he's not going to like the quarterback you drafted. We just saw that. We had the Dwayne Haskins situation. We had Robert Griffin III from before. So that's your whole cycle you're getting involved in there. If you keep pushing this quarterback thing down the road, you need to go all in, because you need to start that clock now. You got to have a veteran next year at some point on the roster too, but you need to go and get that quarterback. You can't talk about it anymore. It's obvious that is the big glaring thing that is missing here. I mean, okay, God bless Taylor Heinicke. He's done it. Nobody thought he could get this far. He just can't do it. He doesn't have the arm. We saw it twice the other day in the game. Try to throw the ball away to the stands. He ends up stays in the field of play and gets picked off. I mean, he just can't do it. And that's, so now you have to find that piece, because to Dave's point, you got the Deron Paynes of the world, those guys that are going to be coming up. Terry McLaurin, you got to convince this guy to somehow stay, and you got to sign him. Brandon Sheriff's going to be out of here. So you have those sort of pieces that you're going to have to fill, but your first and foremost priority is a quarterback. You can't talk about it anymore. You have to go and do it, because, look, the injuries and the COVID situation, that's fine. Everybody's dealing with it. So that is the responsibility then of your front office, whether that's Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, Marty Herney. You need to have the depth too. You have some money to play with. You have to go stockpile these positions and the depth, and then get the quarterback first and foremost. Well, we're right back having this conversation again.
And also George touched on the point that I made in the column, and that is Terry McLaurin is a free agent after the 2022 season. He is your most important player. He is your 100%. Best player. He is your most likable player. He is, for all intents and purposes, the face of your franchise. You have to get a quarterback to pair him with in order to keep him here long term. If I'm a receiver and I have 4 different guys throwing me the ball every year, I'm going to go to Green Bay, where I know Aaron Rodgers is, or at least in years past, or I'm going somewhere where the quarterback position is stable, or at least they think it's stable. You don't have a reason to sell him on staying here to this point. So if you, and I keep using this as an example because he is a young quarterback who is actually a day apart from McLaurin, ironically, Deshaun Watson, if you make that trade, what other statement can you make to sell him on the fact that, hey, we're serious about making you productive and us winning? we went out and got this guy. So even
Cam
if it
Newton.
doesn't work out, even if it backfires, at least you swung for the fences and you did the thing that made the most sense at the time.
I'm
You
going to look at
also
the,
need to get him a receiver. McLaurin needs another receiver, because otherwise it's going to be just like this year where he was the only threat. If you look at his numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but post bye week, his numbers were just, he wasn't able to get downfield. He wasn't able to get as many targets. And it was a byproduct of the fact that there are no other weapons on this team to stretch the secondary.
I mean, he was completely shut out in that first Dallas game, and Diggs ain't that good. I know he's got a lot of interceptions, but he gives up as many plays as he makes.
I'll go with the glass half full. I think Ron Rivera's done it before. We don't need an experimental coach like a Zorn or a Gruden to see if they can become a head coach. I think it has been both years extenuating circumstances for him to start to build a program. I think he does know what he's doing. So I think at that point, that's the one rock of stability that we have in Ron Rivera as the head coach. And let's see what Martin Mayhew can do. He's not been here that long. He's not been here the full 2 years. And I think we have to show some faith in him. That's going to do it for this week's DC Sports Huddle. As always, we appreciate the time. For Rob Woodfork, Dave Preston, George Wallace, I'm Dave Johnson. This has been the DC Sports Huddle, and it's sponsored by MGM National Harbor. It's time to change the game at BetMGM Sports.
Great.